Welcome to the Joe Cohen Show. Join me as I share my experience with biohacking and invite top health experts to explore the latest technology, supplements, research, and resources for optimizing your body and brain. Hey everyone, I'm here with Anthony DiClementi. He is a world-class health expert specializing in unconventional fat loss, energy production, brain performance, and natural healing. He's written books on biohacking, and he's got a podcast. He's been in the health field for a while. The reason I brought him on is because I just like people who have been hacking at their bodies for a while, just really doing experiments, trying things out. Try just for years, not just the people who got on recently to intermittent fasting or cold plunge. I mean, Anthony's been in the industry for a while, so he's been trying a whole bunch of stuff for a long time. And I like those people who've been around the block for some time with all this health stuff. And so I just want to pick his brain, just see what he's doing, what he's up to, he does a lot of coaching. So what does he do for mood, cognitive function, just a whole bunch of different areas. So thanks for coming on, Anthony.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited for our conversation.
Awesome. All right. So just we were just talking about some genetic testing. Do you use any genetic testing in your coaching at all?
So we've worked with Tree of Life Health and Emily Givler over there. And I bought, and included a bunch of that in our coaching packages for a few years, where they've got this functional genomic analysis where you take your organic acids test and then you take your DNA, and they kind of overlap the two, like two overlapping concentric circles, and then tell you a bunch of it was Mercola that turned me on to it. So I've done that. We've used that with some clients. I've used some of the more like affordable ones, that you and I discussed, like Strategene and that sort of thing. And then I've got clients and people sending me stuff all the time because these companies are like popping up out of nowhere, or popping up everywhere, I guess. And people will ask me about them, and I'm like, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to shit on a bunch of companies, but there's stuff where people are charging like $600 to $1,000 for like a couple snips to tell you if you're like MTHFR and you need some extra B12 and folate. And I'm like, what are we even charging for right now? It's like, is this the state of health? So I don't mess with most of them. And I have used and like Self-Decode a lot, but you guys are on the short list of like 2 or 3 that I've messed with. And the rest of them, I'm like, I just don't really see the value in a lot of these companies. And I think that, they're throwing around a lot of buzzwords without commensurate value backing up what they're doing for the end user.
Absolutely. So we did a lot of upgrades. I don't know if you used it recently, but the client can use it, and you can actually, as a coach, you can for free, you can look at all their results, and they can upload lab tests. You can take notes on it. You can see a whole bunch of different like genetic predispositions and recommendations from there. So I think it's a cool thing. But like you
I got to
said,
get back in there then.
yeah, you should try it out. I'll give you an account. But like you said, like there's a new DNA company popping up every day, and it
Mhm.
seems like every time they test for less SNPs, they charge more money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? It's like, here's literally like the one that you were talking about, the 10x Health,
Yeah.
literally doing 5 freaking SNPs and charging $600. And these are 5 SNPs that you can get on any like DNA test. Like, it's part of the Self-Decode test. We
Yeah.
test not only those 5 SNPs, but you could get access to 100 other million SNPs.
Mhm.
So plus the underlying technology, which is something people don't realize, is so it's not only the number of SNPs, it's what you do with the information. So if we just
Mhm.
didn't really have much to do with it, then it's like, okay, let's just take 100. What are we going to do with 10,000 anyway? The thing is, with the new approaches in genetics, the only way to actually predict a predisposition for something is to look at a very large number of variants. So let's say you, Anthony, have 300 million SNPs or genetic variants in you.
Mhm.
If you look at 5 genetic variants, there's only so much it could tell you, right? And so what these companies are doing is they're inflating what these few variants can do. Not that they're not valuable at all, but obviously what makes more sense is, get a test like Self-Decode, get all the other information, and then you could also get those 5 variants quite easily, right?
Yeah.
It's mainly they're looking at MTHFR. His whole thing is MTHFR And then if you have that variant, you need extra folate. And he describes it as like, you need it for serotonin and you need the raw materials. It's a lot more complex than he makes it out to be, of course. But the point is that, it's just, he does, I think he's a great salesman. And so that's what the industry has come down to is like, just create, like, we can literally create every single company on the, like, any company you can think of, we can create it in a day. Just take all their snips from our platform, add some content, put some references there. And that's
Hmm.
actually one of the things that we're going to do. We're going to allow people to basically like create their own reports,
Hmm.
practitioners. Pick whatever snips you want. We can put whatever information there, create whatever report you want, because that's how all these companies, like, we're trying to, in some way, we're trying to fight against that because that isn't the best way to do it. But on the other hand, there's so many people that are just like fighting against us from a marketing perspective because it's like we've got the magic formula with like 5 snips or 80 snips or whatever.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it's like, okay, we'll just take all your snips and create the same report, right? We'll call it 100x health.
It's a it's a tricky landscape because you're seeing that so many people are overwhelmed. They've got information overload. They're stressed, and you tell them that there's an easy solution and a couple small things that are all they really need to pay attention to, and it's appealing. The reality is, at a certain point, how many times you gonna, like, keep going back to the stove and getting burned by marketing that tells you something that takes work and a little bit of neuroplasticity and figuring out your health is easier than it should be. We keep going to that and realizing it doesn't work, but we keep getting burned. And at a certain point, I think that there's a big bifurcation happening in our species. And a lot of people are going to be developing a much higher level of mastery with their health in body, mind, and spirit. And a lot of people are just going to be getting their information from the black rectangle on their wall and their little phone and doing whatever's easy and wondering why it doesn't work.
100%.
Yeah. Once you kinda snap out of it and you get out of the, like, the hypnosis, the appeal to authority, like, putting all these people on and I got nothing but love for a ton of doctors. We work with a ton of doctors, and there are many phenomenal doctors who are, working in a more functional, holistic, whatever nomenclature you wanna use, way. I'm just talking about, like, we're all hypnotized to put these people on a pedestal, to turn over and outsource our health to them, and then when you actually look at it from where you're like, wait, this person's not healthy. Why am I taking
Mhm.
advice from them? The only tools they have are throwing drugs at me or telling me I need a surgery. They don't know anything about nutrition. That wasn't covered in school. They don't know anything about exercise or you know what I mean? So I think a lot of people have realized that, especially over these past few years, and they're taking more responsibility, which ultimately is a great thing. And then you take into account, like, there's this whole invisible world of, let's just say, nutrition that plays a massive role. I worked years ago. I taught yoga, did personal training, Pilates, all this stuff at one of the best studios in Chicago. One of the girls there, Vida, came over from the Ukraine. She was like really into bodybuilding and ate the exact same things she ate over in Ukraine. Like literally measured her meals, picked out, her proteins, carbohydrates, fats, all this stuff. She came over here, started blowing up. She gained like 20 pounds in the first month. She's like eating not only the exact same foods, the exact same quantities of foods. I was like OCD anal. She goes, your guys' food is fucking poisoned over here. And I'm like, you're right. It is. It's been like that since the 90s. And it's getting worse. And if
E
if you just look at what the food is and you see it as like, okay, that would be the food if you got it from a local farmer at a farmer's market. But after it's been shipped around the world and irradiated and covered in a whole bunch of nonsense and pesticides and glyphosate, they've got like the shit that's allowed in organic food now. They just keep changing definitions and sneaking more bullshit in there. When you realize that, you're like, apples are not apples. Oranges are not oranges. There's an
I'll tell
invisible
you
realm.
something, there's definitely something to be said about food quality. There's no
Yeah.
question about it. Like, I live in Israel right now in Tel Aviv, and the food quality here is significantly better than it was in the United States. I'm not exactly
You
sure
look
why.
healthier than I've seen you before. Not that you didn't
Oh,
look healthy
thanks.
before, but you look healthy and vibrant now.
Yeah, I
Got that
appreciate
Tel
that.
Aviv glow?
Yeah. So, the thing is though, I'm wondering though, I don't know. I look. my kind of general philosophy, I want to discuss a little bit. Like, there's based on what the research says. Like, you don't see a lot of research based on here's food quality and here's the outcomes necessarily. Like when you're looking at studies on fruits and vegetables, people who eat more fruits and vegetables are healthier. You don't really see like, okay, people they're not doing large studies on like people who eat grass-fed chickens, with this. So we don't there's a little bit of a black hole. And I think people who are on the frontier like you want to do everything that could like enhance your health. And it's not going to be there's no question that it's definitely not worse for your health, right? And it's probably better, but we don't really understand how much better and how it exactly impacts everything.
Mhm.
My position is that based on my experience, my experience, I did not find that those were the highest leverage items. And
Mhm.
maybe you have a different experience. I'm curious what you think.
I think it totally depends on the person and based on what they're experiencing, figuring out what is, the main offender or the primary movers that are responsible for the symptoms that are bothering them. And it's not always bullshit in their food, you know? It can go a lot further and a lot deeper. And that's where we sort of get into some of the diagnostics, which are like not as good as we'd like to think they are. But, everyone's talking about like, "Oh, did you get a full blood panel?" What is a full blood panel? Like, you and I could easily drop 10 Gs on labs in a second if we're getting into environmental toxins and glyphosate and heavy metals, and none of that's in a full blood panel, but
Right.
that's impacting the gut microbiome and the mitochondrial health and energy production just as much as someone's testosterone, right? If you go back 10, 15 years, I was obsessed with scientific literature and studies and almost didn't trust my own intuition and my own real world experience unless it was validated in a study.
Mhm.
After seeing how much those things are also fucked with, and that we're like kind of, with the internet and social media and stuff, we're sort of on the edge of this post truth world where I think that the next level is us coming to a place where we're able to combine an understanding of the scientific literature with our real world experience, with our intuition, and saying, hey, based on the pattern recognition that I have consciously and subconsciously, does this align with everything I know to be true? And then being able to test certain things in the real world for ourselves and with other people in a safe, intelligent manner to see, what produces the result or the alleviation of negative symptoms. That's kind of where I think things are going and where I've taken things. So it's that blending of the two, the art and the science. Because I think if everyone just goes to a place where it has to be printed in a double blind placebo controlled trial, you stop thinking and you stop learning from nature, which is the greatest laboratory.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. I kind of what you said about everybody's got their own thing. I 100% agree with that. So even if you look at people's genetics, for example, we have genetic reports on BPA sensitivity, right?
Mhm.
It turns out that I have higher BPA sensitivity.
Yeah.
So, and you know what? I don't do well with plastics or shit in fish. And so when I was eating tons of fish, I was
Mhm.
getting brain fog. Just
Mhm.
like tons, and you're like, "Hey, fish is very healthy, right?"
Mhm.
Now the scientific studies show like twice 2, 3 times a week, and then it shows like if you eat too much fish, it's a problem. Why would it be a problem? Well, because it's tons of plastics in the ocean,
Mhm.
right? Microplastics. But
Yeah.
it gets to, like, the genetics. I That's where I think the individual it's like, what are you really most sensitive to? So, for example, glyphosate or mold. We have a report on pesticide sensitivity, on mold
Mhm.
sensitivity, on a whole bunch of different things, and so I think, like, those things will be relevant to like, for example, I don't have a higher problem with glyphosate, and the truth is that when I eat organic or non-organic, I don't notice the difference.
Mhm.
Is it harming my body? Probably at least a little. I'm not gonna lie, right? And it's just but it's a question of how much, right?
Right.
I've always felt like I'm not super sensitive to mold. Now, if I'm in a moldy place, I'll notice my cognition going down. But
Yeah, I get
the
tired. I get
yeah,
real
I get
tired.
tired too. But the minute I get out, I'm fine,
Yeah,
right?
me
Whereas
too.
other people will be like, yeah, I'm
It
the
only
whole week
bothers
I'm
me if
done.
I'm in a moldy place. Yeah,
Exactly, right.
yeah.
But then some people like Dave Asprey, he like he's like his whole week is like he needs to take a whole bunch of binders or else he can't
Mhm.
function. Like there's certain mold people that they get leveled for a while, right? Because
Yeah,
they're more sensitive. So I think it really comes down to right that we have like reports on glyphosate sensitivity, organophosphate sensitivity, heavy metals. There's some people they get exposed to heavy metals and they're just floored, right?
yeah, yeah.
And yeah. What do you
I
like,
mean,
what are
I
your
think
sensitivities, like, for example? What do you find
well,
your sensitivity?
I think the sensitivity question sort of comes into, what is it? Dr. Stephen Cabral, I think he talks about like the rain barrel effect. Like we can take so many toxins, and then at a certain point, like the barrel starts overflowing, and that's when it really becomes a problem. Where let's say there's like two versions of Joe. There's Joe with like zero mercury or heavy metals in his body, and then there's Joe who's like right near the top of that barrel. And Joe, who's right near the top of the barrel, goes out, sees some shit about wild caught fish being good for him, starts crushing wild caught fish, and the extra mercury makes you feel terrible. And you're like, yo, this is I don't this worked for Anthony. This is not working for me, you know? But maybe the version of Joe whose mercury levels were lower could crush fish and feel great. I think
Absolutely.
I think that's a factor too. And it's I think so I think what we're looking at here is a combination of the sensitivities, the predispositions, and where are levels in the body. Like if we're talking about glyphosate, I want to get a GPL glyphosate test and see where levels are to quantify it, especially because then I'm going to put together a program for myself or that client in order to get glyphosate out of the body. And I'm going to want to retest in 6 months and see if they've gone down. You know what I mean? Because if they haven't, then that's still coming in somehow too. So I think it's kind of like the both of those. Like, is there a susceptibility? And then where are levels in the body? I had a hair tissue mineral analysis done a few years ago with Stephen Cabral, and he's like, dude, you've got the highest aluminum levels I've ever seen in a human being. He's like, I've done hundreds of
Interesting.
these. You're like 10x the upper limit. And I'm like, is that bad? It sounds bad.
Sounds like
But
Grant Cardone.
does he have really high aluminum levels?
No, no, you just said 10x.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yes. I've got I've got the Grant Cardone aluminum levels. And, so I do a shitload of BioSil, liquid silicon, and, maybe I'll get it out, maybe I won't, but I don't like freak out about it. I don't I think that it's easy in the biohacking space. There's a lot of like socially acceptable health related OCD. And I I think a lot of that is like it's like rewarded and stuff, but realistically, that person's in a constant state of fear,
Yeah,
where I'm sort of like, I want to live a long life. I want to live a vibrant life, but I'm not going to sit here freaking out because I got high aluminum levels. I'm going to do what I can and sweat and detox and take some binders and take some chelation agents and enjoy my life.
absolutely. I would, suggest, like, just if it were me and you could do whatever you want, but, like, I would look at all these because it's so easy because like you could take one genetic test and look at your predisposition for all these things, right?
Mhm.
You could see all the heavy metals, all the pesticides, and like it gives you a predisposition for these things. Now,
Really?
then you could look at those things and look and be like, okay, have a better idea because if like you said, you could drop 10 grand on blood tests without blinking an eye, right? Like I'll
Easy.
test glyphosate levels, I'll test this, whatever. The problem is that you're not going to test for everything. A lot of people don't have all that money, 10 grand to just spend on testing everything. You got to kind of be a little more strategic. And so I think the genetics allows you to be more strategic in what you would test for, or what where the problem may be.
Yeah.
And and so for me, like for example, I've never like, I know a lot of things just from doing experiments for on myself for 20 years, right?
Mhm.
And so, for example, I know I'm not sensitive to heavy metals.
Mhm.
And so, for example, I'll give you like, let's say I was eating tons of fish. So fish is mercury. So I thought, okay, it's probably the mercury. That's the first thing you're gonna get to. I started taking every mercury binder that you can get your hands on, like, and like no difference on the brain fog whatsoever,
Mhm.
right? So
Mhm.
obviously I'm not affected by the placebo effect as as I should have been because like you would say, oh, you tried this and But dude, I tried everything, nothing worked for heavy metals, mercury. Then I tried the activated charcoal, and it was like that. Boom, activated
Really?
charcoal, yeah, binds to the plastics. And when I look at my genetics, it says I've got a higher sensitivity to BPA. You have to look at the biggest sources. So actually, the number one source of plastic are receipts. The BPA is receipts. So I don't touch receipts. Literally, like, people get them from those receipts or newspapers or water bottles, so I do that stuff, and then with the fish, I'll eat it with activated charcoal to, to get rid of those plastic
Interesting.
toxins. Yeah.
I'd seen something recently that quantified the amount of plastic that all of us take in on a monthly basis, and it's like equivalent to eating a credit card every month.
100%. Like, I could see that.
'Cause could you see someone like if someone ate a credit card, you'd be like, "Are you insane? You're gonna die." And they're like, "No,
Right.
that's like every human every month with how much is in our environment, our water, and
100%. I
everything."
could see that being true. It's
Yeah,
like that's one of the things that we've never had, like, we've never dealt with plastics before, right? It's a new environmental thing,
right. And I think
and I
that's when we're talking about, I mean, there's no question the modern man is devolving at a rapid rate. Like our IQ's 8 points lower than 20 years ago. We're 50% more likely to be depressed than 20 years ago. We're our testosterone levels are 50% lower than they were 50 years ago. We got sperm counts that are like 62% lower than 50 years ago, and we're
ha
300% more likely to be obese, right? Like something's going on, and we need to look at what are the biggest changes? So plastics is a huge one. All of a sudden, it's everywhere. It's exponential. I think EMFs is a big one because it's so exponential. Like 100 years ago, this like it wasn't even a factor. Now it's like a billion times more. And people like you said, people walk around with their cell phone on their nuts all day. It's like it could be interfering with things a little bit. And then we get into the pesticides and glyphosates.
You wanna hear about the one health hack that is sure to change your life? Okay, here it is. Subscribing to this podcast. 67% of listeners aren't subscribed to the show, so please don't forget to show your support by hitting the subscribe button now. You'll not only be supporting the show, but also investing in yourself and your health journey, all while helping to keep us ad-free. What's your testosterone like? Have you ever also checked your sperm count?
It's okay. I thought about checking my sperm count, actually,
I
that's
checked
funny.
my sperm count.
Yeah, how was it?
They said it was the highest I've ever seen, double the
Come
highest I've
on,
ever
you
seen.
stop it.
I'm not kidding.
Really?
Yeah.
You got any
And
kids
then
running around?
I looked it up online and it actually was super high.
I mean, every guy listening now probably any woman listening who, like, is trying to get pregnant is like, "Okay, what'd you do? What do you think had the biggest
All right.
positive impact?"
So I'll tell you what I think. Number one is testosterone has a huge impact. So
Yeah.
having your testosterone in a good range and your
Mhm,
estradiol. So if your estradiol is too high, it'll impact it.
mm,
But it has to be too high. It's not. I don't know if it's dose dependent, but so my estradiol was good range. We have all these optimal ranges. Like you can actually, when I give you an account, you could upload all of your labs for all the years, and
mhm.
it'll show you what's in the optimal range, what's not. But in
Nice.
any case, so my testosterone, I was able to like 2.5x it naturally with some supplements and different things. And so my testosterone was about at 1,000,
That's
right? Which
great.
is
That's
yeah,
without
naturally
TRT?
no TRT. Yeah,
That's great.
yeah, yeah. So number one is you have high testosterone. That's gonna help, right?
Yeah.
Number two is certain antioxidant supplements help, like acetylcarnitine, NAC. Those are just some examples. So, like, if your body is in a good oxidative balance, then you're gonna have good quality semen. If you're, like, fighting a lot, like, having oxidative stress kills off the
Mhm.
semen pretty much.
Mm,
So that's, like, another big thing. And so I was taking acetylcarnitine, I was taking NAC, I still take them, but those are some of the things. And I just think, to be honest, like, there's probably, like, a lot of other things. These are just 2 things that are, like, very, very clear. It's super
mhm.
clear in the research. You got good testosterone, you take, like, you're in a good oxidative balance or you're taking some antioxidants. Let's talk about what are some of the things that you do for mood, for example?
For mood, so I have transitioned to a lot more injectable vitamins and nutrients and put together like a number of compounds, including, B1 thiamine, B12, B6. I do paracetam and basically like injectable paracetam for oxygenation and blood flow to the brain and cross hemispheric communication between the right and left hemispheres of the brain. And basically, like I feel like the future, at least what I think is going to be best for our species, is where more people have more autonomy over their health and access to these things. So I wanted to figure out how to give myself, quote unquote IVs by doing like subcutaneous injections in my hip and that sort of thing. And I've found that there are a number of these vitamins where, like, yeah, I have the MTHFR genetic variants. A lot of people do. Probably a lot of people listening to this
I
show
have
do.
those.
And
You have 2 of those variants?
yeah, yeah. And
So
I like won the lottery with everything. I'm E4 for ApoE,
oh, shit. Okay.
like 20x increased risk of
Yeah,
Alzheimer's, all that
Alzheimer's.
stuff, you know?
Okay.
And
You should look at some of our, yeah, you should look at some of our predispositions as well, like the polygenic ones. You could see
yeah, I'm
if you're
I'm
at
down.
risk for atherosclerosis, like a whole bunch of different cool stuff. For me,
Yeah.
for example, it showed Parkinson's actually,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
which is
And
interesting.
so you might be interested in the B1 injections. I think like
Dude, I do so well with B1.
yeah, exactly, exactly. I think a lot of Parkinson's is, I mean, there's and you're probably already on this, but there's a genetic disorder, called SCA2 that's characterized by degeneration in the back of the brain called the cerebellum. I mean, that's when it's in a more advanced state. But a lot of this stuff that starts to manifest early as brain fog, fatigue, mood fluctuations, it's individuals that don't metabolize thiamine properly, and the only way to really get it is injection. And you start with, I'll usually start clients out at 100 milligrams a week and then go up to 200 milligrams a week. And you start seeing, I mean, dude, 1400% increase in dopamine, and not quite that high for norepinephrine. But a lot of Parkinson's isn't just dopamine like we've been told. It's not all just degeneration of the
Absolutely.
substantia nigra. It's just as much norepinephrine and the interrelationship of pesticides and metals and, glyphosate. But the simplest way that I think, if I had to throw a blanket statement that is never accurate, but that would protect the most people from Parkinson's, it would be vitamin B1 injections, 200 milligrams once a week.
Interesting. Okay. I'm not a huge fan of injection just because number one,
Very
it
uncomfortable.
hurts. It's uncomfortable. And I just didn't notice any additional benefit of the injections versus just taking the supplements orally. I mean, obviously there could be a few exceptions for things that don't get like absorbed, but
Mhm.
I find the stuff like is fine orally. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, yeah. I think it varies. It varies. I was, I'd taken such high doses of B12, methylcobalamin, every form, hydroxycobalamin, dinosylcobalamin. And, you get the blood test and they're like, "Oh my god, stop taking B12. What are you doing?" But when I switched to injection, I was like, "Okay, there's a lot more meat on this bone." A lot of mental clarity, energy. I could, like, where I'm at
And what
now,
did your blood test say?
I haven't done one at my current B12 dosages, but I would assume they're gonna scare whatever doctors look at it. But yeah, I mean, I'm at a point now where if I went out and had cocktails, whatever, especially if I'm conscientious about, my big thing is like, I gotta stop, like the same way that we stop eating 3 or 4 hours before bed. If I stop the cocktails 3 or 4 hours before bed, if I'm doing the drinks like during the day, I'm outside in the sun, active, completely different. And
100%.
you go back like 10 years, you have these hangovers where you're like, you feel like the world is ending. And now I'm like, I don't miss a beat. It's great.
Right, right,
So
right.
shoring up some of that stuff for me via injections. I think like if we spend too much time indoors, our nervous system and our biology starts to entrain to the indoor lifestyle. You sort of become like a zoo animal, And if your culture is a lot more like riding bikes, connected to the elements, outside in the sun, outdoor gyms, and you just make that your default, you stay wild, and your
100%.
your nervous system entrains to the sun and the Schumann resonance as opposed to like your cell phone.
And another big thing here, and somebody just brought this up to me. They're like, I don't understand all these people here. They're like, they love the sunset. I'm like, yeah, why do you not like like why do you not love the sunset?
Yeah,
It
yeah,
feels really good. You sit down, you watch the sunset, it looks really nice. And so it's like it's a big thing here. People like love watching the sunset.
yeah.
And like that's even like people go on dates. Oh, let's watch the sunset, bottle of wine, whatever. Like it's like a normal thing. You don't you never heard that in California, right? It's just
Mhm.
like it's that's what I think the culture in the US is so unhealthy. It's just
Yeah,
it
it
has
it
to
is. It
change.
it it is, and, yeah, I don't know if I look like I think, the majority's going one direction, and then you've got the minority going another direction that sort of consciously design their life and can say, "Alright, I see where, quote, unquote, the herd is going. That's not really the life that I want." And, the more we're aware of this shit, the more control we have over it.
Social is like one of the big
Yes.
factors in health. And I was even in California, even if you're in a city, like people are in their own lane.
Yeah.
Everybody's in their
Yeah, yeah.
own lane. It's a very antisocial place.
Mhm.
If you don't like, especially if you're not plugged into a university or a job or whatever, like you're
Mhm.
not like plugged in or you didn't grow up there. It's just like everybody drives in the car, looks down their own lane, and
Mhm.
then and it's just like they're everybody's in their own world. Whereas here, it's just super social. You just like everybody's talking to each other.
I love
You
that.
just meet
Yeah.
people all over the place. I feel like it's a little bit Mediterranean in that sense. Like the Spanish are like that as well. The
Yeah.
Italians are more extroverted, more social. So that it's more prized to be like open. I don't know. It's just like everyone's open. It feels like, and even if you're in a certain cities in the U.S., everybody's kind of like in their own
Dude,
lane. I feel like the
for
whole
sure.
culture has to change there.
Before I left Chicago, it was like I was amazed because 'cause you'd be walking on the street and I would see hundreds of people. I'd pass hundreds of people. I'd be shocked if I got eye contact from, like, 3 people. Everyone's looking at their phone, looking down, you know what I mean? It's like I'm
Yeah.
like, "Am I in a movie or something?" Like, no one even looks at each other anymore.
Let's move on to like some of the supplements you take. Like, can you list off some of the supplements you take?
Well, yeah, so right now, the you're talking about oral only?
Well, anything. Just but we could start with the oral or just I
Yeah.
guess just the general. Like, do you have a list? How do you do that?
Yeah, I've got like 8,000 Evernotes and I track everything for myself and every client and keep it pretty dialed in. So, I
So,
mean,
like, how many supplements do you take in a given day?
I rotate. So every morning I'll wake up and I'm doing basically like the first thing I do is I mix up some electrolytes with the element. So Rob Wolf's supplement that's got sodium, magnesium, potassium. I'll take some of that, a big bottle of, clean water, fluoride free, chlorine free water, mix up the element in there and then I make up a batch of 7.5 grams of pectosol, the modified citrus pectin as a
Oh wow.
binder. So I wake up
Mm.
and I drink the modified citrus pectin as the first thing and then sometimes I've got an espresso machine, and sometimes I'll do like a double espresso and kinda just sip that and chill, and then I give myself 30 minutes before anything else oral supplement, to kinda let the binder work through
Mm.
and do its thing. I just feel much better, and then after reading, The Survival Paradox by Dr. Isaac Ilias and the effect of modified citrus pectin on specifically, like, galectin-3, which is what a lectin secreted by macrophages that plays a role in cancer and heart disease and pretty much anything inflammatory. Also works as like a biofilm buster in some. I just feel better when I take the Pectosol. So I'll do that twice a day. And during that
You
30 minutes,
notice? Quick
yeah,
quick question. Do you test every supplement that you take individually to make sure that you feel better from it individually?
sometimes a good amount of the time, yes. there are times where I'll integrate a couple things at once if I'm just gonna be taking them for a short period of time. Often it's like it's almost like I'm putting together an all-star team, and a number of things get like tryouts, and sometimes I'll test them one at a time and see. But there's a lot that, like, you could take 200 to 300 supplements and justify every single one. But,
Mhm.
as healthy and serving a purpose, but realistically, like, I don't want to spend that much time on it, and I want to be like, okay, what's going to be the most impactful shit for me? And so
So,
I've
like,
yeah.
what have you found that has been the biggest game changers in like you clearly identified that you took this thing and it was a game changer, and how was it a game changer? Game changer is that like something that you clearly noticed a difference from and that it improved your life and you continue on it.
You're talking about Pectisol?
Anything could be Pexol, just like
With the protocol that I've put together with B12, B6, B1, magnesium injections, and then I'm cycling paracetam, that one's been huge. The biggest things that I've noticed are almost like no need for stimulants, way more consistent energy throughout the day, mood is better, periods of, like, brain fog just don't happen, and then additionally, like, way more resilient where I can, like I said, I could go out and have cocktails and whatever, and it's like, I'm good, like, unaffected by
but
it,
let's Right, but let's break that down a little bit because
Mhm,
I do very well with B vitamins in general, right?
mhm.
You have this protocol, right? And it works for you. The question is, have you tried the protocol without Prastam and how did that work, right? So I want to kind of make it a little more, break it down. Have you tried just B1, just
Yeah,
B6? Like, because not everybody, it might like work for you great. And,
mhm,
but maybe someone else just doesn't do as well with Parastam or whatever, right? So like
yeah,
number
y
one is if you tried it all separately and then you tried it together, like how did
yeah,
that work out?
yeah, so I started with B12, and specifically the form of as hydroxycobalamin. Reason being a lot of the work of Dr. Cheney, who had helped a number of people with chronic fatigue, found that yes, methylcobalamin was helpful, but more people that had experienced fatigue in the past responded to hydroxycobalamin. But what was usually required was 5 milligrams to 10 milligrams a day, or 5,000 micrograms to 10,000 micrograms a day. It's a big dose. It's a big dose.
Yeah.
So especially if you're getting like 1 milligram per ml, it's a large quantity of B12. So I started with
Mhm.
that, worked my way up to 5 milligrams, noticed a big difference. Then would pulse, going up to 7, 8, 10, and even bigger difference. Now it's just a matter of, I when I keep it between 5 and 10, mostly just because of how much do I want to spend on this stuff every month and how much do I want to inject, that seems to top things off. And then depending on what clients have had going on and how problematic their symptoms are, we've found that to be helpful for a lot of people, especially in like the brain fog, fatigue, mood fluctuations categories. Then the second one that I tested was thiamine, B1,
Okay.
and then also helpful. And so those two were both very, very noticeable, huge shifts. B6, I can't quantify as much. I've had clients and like even a woman that we worked with years ago, she was like having all sorts of issues during her pregnancy, took six, pyridoxine HCl, nothing. We got her on high dose of pyridoxal 5 phosphate orally, big positive shift. But, getting into like 100, 200 milligrams of P5P a day, which isn't cheap. Then when we
That's a
added
large dosage. Yeah.
a large dose, right? And it's not cheap. And then when we added the 25 milligrams of B6 as an injection, sub Q for her, huge. And morning sickness gone, energy, fatigue, mental clarity, so it's a little bit different. I can't say that the B6 has had that massive of an impact on me personally that I've observed in the same category as B12 or B1, but I'm confident enough with the scientific literature and the neurological benefits that I'm almost considering it a preventative tool. And I still take 100 to 300 milligrams of P5P orally most days.
Yeah, that's very legitimate, and that's kind of what I'm trying to tease apart. Like, what do you take just because the scientific literature versus what do you take like B1, B12? Because you know, actually noticed on yourself that this has been a
Yeah.
game changer. Like beyond any kind of placebo effect, right? This is a game changer. So,
Yeah.
like for example, I do the same thing. For example, I look at how do I feel from it? What are my lab tests like? What are my genetics like? What are all the studies say about it? And how
Mhm.
does it correspond with my goals?
And with the
So
piracetam, because you asked about that. So I
yeah.
had an experience there. I'd done piracetam. I probably tried it somewhere in like the mid 2000s for the first time, and huge positive impact. But then the pattern that I ran into with piracetam and aniracetam a lot of times is it's like you're playing this balancing act with like the choline donors and the racetams, and it's like
Right.
really, really good until it isn't. And then you like bonk out in some capacity where I'm like, then actually feel worse. And
Right.
the I got sick of those cycles because I'd be like, I think this is all just evening out anyhow. Cause I'm like, my cognition's better and verbal recall and all that stuff, and then I bonk out and I feel like shit for a week while I bring things back into balance. But when I was in Germany, they were I was talking to them about piracetam and some of my experience. They were like, "Well, have you tried it intravenously?" And I was like, "No." So they gave me 12 grams of piracetam intravenously,
Oh my
and
gosh.
I went and just filmed a video on my phone ad lib for like 15 minutes straight, and it was like limitless. It was like I had access to all this stuff. And it was right after it was an hour or two after the piracetam IV. And I was like, whoa, the injection is totally different. And you don't have to play that balancing act with alpha GPC or citicoline and everything else. And so then I did it again, maybe 4 or 5 days later. It was a huge positive shift, similar to like the first time I took piracetam orally. And then so more recently I've been getting that and giving myself the IV, but just injecting it sub Q in the hip and doing
Hmm.
6 grams at a time because it's just a large quantity of liquid, you
Hmm.
know? And so I'll do like 6 grams one day and then 6 grams another day and feel
And you
pretty,
still feel
pretty,
that?
I feel it not as much as 12 grams, but there was also, so like that situation with the 12 grams, I was in Germany doing extreme whole body hyperthermia because I'd gotten, Lyme disease the second time. So it was also like great to feel my brain fucking working. And the delta was probably more noticeable, where now it's like,
Mhm.
you know, it's good and I enjoy it and I notice it, but it's not that big of a delta.
Interesting. Have you found that your health has improved, let's say in the past year, or do you find like how do you find the curve of your health, overall health? Do you find that it goes up and down, or it's like it goes up and down, but there's still a trend towards improvement, or do you
Yeah.
find that maybe yeah, how does that like work for you?
So right now I feel the best I've ever felt. I'm a little bit like I've been more ripped at other times in my life, where I'm like walking
Hmm.
around at 10% body fat and this and that. But I also have just been kind of enjoying life and having fun a little bit and not paying as much attention to that category. I did, what in early 2020, I had a real weird experience where I got rocked and like just felt like my brain was not working. And so that took a little, I mean, it got where I was like, I mean, dude, I zapped my brain like 60 times doing transcranial magnetic stimulation because I was depressed and didn't know what was going on and what had affected it. So that was one
What
of those.
was it in the end? Did
I,
that
I,
help TDCS?
so it helped for me, being totally transparent. I got put on Prozac when I was 19.
Hmm.
I had a real weird situation. I was playing soccer at U of I club soccer. We had gone down to train with the team, and I was moving into the fraternity house. This is like 2001. I go into the fraternity house, and I'm getting hit with like I'm like all of a sudden narcoleptic. I was like exhausted. I'd need to like lay down. And, in hindsight, was it mold? Was I moving into a moldy house? I don't know what it was, but I ended up taking Prozac because that was where my consciousness was at the time. And I was depressed and tired. You know what I mean? And it helped. It honestly helped. It caused some other issues. And maybe that's why my aluminum levels were so high, but there was a long period where I was like, I wanted to get off of that. I was doing ayahuasca and all these different things,
What
and
about
ultimately,
5-HTP and tryptophan?
yeah, dude, I've been taking 5-HTP and SAMe and St. John's wort and all that stuff for since at least I was in GNC, like using their reference books to like look up different things for mood and depression because like I didn't want to be on Prozac. And that stuff helped a lot, but it like wasn't enough. And what I had
So
sort of
when did you get
realized,
off of it, or if you're still on it, or
so I got off of it multiple times. And so like 2011, I was off of it for a long period of time and then got back on and then got back off. And ultimately, like I was looking at everything through the lens of this is a serotonin problem.
right?
When I kind of started integrating, like now we do a good amount of neurocognitive testing and brain health assessment. And what I was finding was I'm more of a neurotransmitter deficient or a norepinephrine deficiency guy. I thought my dad with Parkinson's, I started looking at dopamine. Nothing I did to elevate dopamine really made a big difference. A lot of the serotonin stuff didn't make a big difference, or it helped a little bit, but not that much. When I started focusing on norepinephrine, then a lot shifted. I always responded really well to ice baths, and
Mhm.
you do ice baths, you get a 300% lift in norepinephrine. So it was sort of coming at it from a different angle and a lot of trial and error and figuring things out, and also realizing that many of these deficiencies on the nutrient side and hormone side and neurotransmitter side can play a big role in how we feel, you know?
Interesting. I'm more of a serotonin guy. I try to play around with, I'd say, like, it's not, people are done, like, they need more of one than the other. There's like a
Mhm.
hierarchy, I feel like, for
Yeah.
everybody. Like, what's your most, right? So for you, it's norepinephrine. For me, it's serotonin.
If people want to do coaching or talk more or anything like that, they can go to biohackercoaching.com and we'll have a conversation to see if I could help them out with anything they got going on. And if we want to do a part two in the future, then we'll circle up and I mean, we could probably
Awesome. Awesome.
do a
Yeah.
biohacking
I
marathon,
was,
I'm sure.
yeah. Of course. That, yeah, we can talk all day about this stuff, probably. I'm really curious about a lot of things you're doing. I think, like I said, you've been at this for a while. How long have you been doing this for?
I mean, I was coaching people in 2008. I released my first online program called the Health Blueprint in 2012, 2013. Then launched Biohacking Secrets, partnered with Russell Brunson on that in 2016. The Biohacker's Guide to Upgrade Energy and Focus. Launched the podcast then. Coached Duncan Keith, Jonathan Tays, like 3 Olympic gold medalists, Stanley Cup winners, bunch of entrepreneurs. Presented at Teal Capital with Dr. Andrew Huberman and Wim Hof and a whole bunch of shit like that. It's been a fun journey and it's been cool and always, I mean, I just love doing this stuff and pushing the envelope forward. I did a workout earlier with that
When did you
catalyst.
start getting into health, like taking supplements and stuff like that?
Dude, I was the kid and I had to ask permission from Bally's Total Fitness to join like 2 years before they would even allow you to join. I wanted to join when I was like 11. They said you had to be like 13 or 14 to get into the gym. I'd have my parents come and sign a waiver and shit for me to be able to work out there. So, yeah, I was
What
like
about, like, when did you start with supplements?
definitely high school because I remember I was captain of the varsity soccer team and all that and I wanted to play in college. So I would I'd hired trainers and do track workouts and the trainers, one of them had me on fucking ephedra. I didn't even know what ephedra was. I'm like, dude, you're cracking me out with this stuff. I'm like, I can't play soccer on ephedra, but I remember taking I remember taking some of my first supplements in high school. I was taking creatine and lifting and all that. So certainly high school. A lot of my friends were were football players and other athletes too. So like I was like the soccer guy doing a lot of the football workouts, and yeah, so
Interesting.
at
So
least
yeah,
it's
like I said, and that was in like 2000 or something.
yeah, I was in high school from 96 to 2000 and then graduated
Okay.
college in
Yeah.
2004.
Like I said, you've been at this for a while, right? Over
Yeah.
like maybe 23, 25 years, whatever it is.
Hmm.
Similar to me, I've been at this for a while. How old are you now, by the way?
41.
41. Yeah. So, and you probably feel like every year you gain knowledge, more information, you can optimize better.
Yeah.
That's what I'm assuming. Yeah.
I got, there was a little bit of a period like these past few years where I was just getting, I don't know, I was just getting a little bit disillusioned with the whole biohacking scene and like where it was going. And I'm like, I don't even know if I want to identify with, it was like shortcut culture, right? And everyone was just regurgitating the same information, and you know what I mean. I was just like,
I
and
don't
then
like that. I like the independent thinkers.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Me too. And then it really, some of these things and some of the work that I was doing with clients and some of like the opportunities that came up with some of my own things like reinvigorated my excitement. And then I was like, oh no, there's a whole other world here that that I hadn't really uncovered. And I've kind of gone back deep down into that and been loving it and enjoying it again and like feeling the passion and excitement and seeing a lot of the positive fruits of innovation, not just in my own life, but like a lot, like the greatest thing for me is like changing someone else's life, especially someone that's been stuck. So like that's been good because for a while I was just watching what was going on a macro level and I was just like, ugh. If I have to hear like one more person talk about how every food is bad for you, I'm gonna vomit in my mouth, you know?
What do you what do you think of that guy Brian Johnson? I'm sure you saw something on
I don't wanna be
him.
dude, you know what's funny is I'm like, someone's gonna ask me about he seems like a nice guy.
He does, right.
Brian
Like,
Johnson,
I think
if
we
if
could
you're
be
if you're
friends.
listening to this, you seem like a really nice, kind dude. He genuinely does. I got nothing but love and I like what he's doing. He also creeps me out a little bit and seems like a robot, and there's something weird about him that I can't put my finger on, and
He seems like a Star Trek figure.
I don't want whatever he has, you know what I mean? So, like,
Right,
I hope he doesn't hear this, and I don't mean this is not me talking shit. This is just like I'm like,
right,
I watch sometimes and I'm like, "What the fuck is going on right now?" You know what I mean? Like, this is
right.
if someone was like, "That's
No,
an
he
AI
seems like a
bot
nice guy.
that we placed
There's
to,
certain
like."
things that there's certain things that I like what he's doing, and in I like that he's taking like he's trying to take a data driven approach. There's certain things I kind of disagree with in the sense of like he's really been only at this for 2 years,
Yeah.
and he's overestimating what you can figure out on his own blueprint for
Yeah,
two
yeah, yeah.
years, right? It's like,
Exactly.
come on, dude, you've been at this for 2 years. Like, it takes a long time to do all these experiments and figure out all these things. Like, there's no way that you're on these 100 supplements and you know exactly what every supplement is doing with every blood
No.
marker here,
No,
right?
there's a lot of things about the approach and everything that raise questions and that there's just no way he's doing what he thinks he's doing.
Right.
But, I respect the effort. I respect people that are eccentric and go all in, and I like that, and I think that is
Same. Like, there's clear differences, right? Like, one thing is I disagree with the whole philosophy of the blueprint. His whole idea is follow my blueprint, and he's a vegan, and it's like, dude, me and you probably followed a vegan blueprint now. No, I definitely followed it, and my health I got a meltdown, right? Like, eh, certain things he's doing, it's like, no, this is not gonna, like, a lot of things he's doing is because he's on a vegan diet or because something that's very particular to him. And it's like, dude, I respect what you're doing here, right? I like that you're getting more people involved. I like that you're, into this stuff. Maybe I think maybe we could, like, he could be an interesting dude, right? But the whole idea of like this is the blueprint, and follow my blueprint, and you're going to get those results is ridiculous.
ridiculous.
Right. It's just like that's the whole reason I got into this, because I was following other people's blueprint. I was like, literally like,
oh, this guy is doing this. I'm going to do exactly what he does. Why am I getting different results? I don't get it. Like this
Yeah.
vegan said, all I need to do is eat this plant-based diet. And like this keto guy said, all I need to do is be keto. And I'm like bopping from one person to the next and like doing intermittent fasting, caloric restriction. And and he says he's hungry all the time. Like you're hungry
Here's
all the time? Like,
here's
yeah.
what I think we're both picking up on. It's junior high biohacking to say this worked great for me and it'll work for all of you too. That's junior high.
Exactly.
Like
No, you
that's the
put it
framework.
exactly.
That's the
That
framework.
you
It's
put it
like,
in
okay,
like
like
that's
you're a really good junior high student.
right.
I don't care how
That
much
you
money
put
you
it
spend.
that's exactly how I would describe it. Like the first 2 years that I got into health optimization, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do this. And then whatever people like you can copy and do exactly like I did, and you'll get the
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Leave it
it's
there.
like
And if he
yeah.
hears this, honestly, he seems like a nice guy. He seems like his heart's in the right place. I saw him on that Impact Theory with Tom Bilyeu, and they both seem like great guys. So I'm not talking shit. I also believe in being honest and saying how you feel, so
Right, right.
that's what you got.
No, no, I'm the same way. I'm not trying to trash talk or anything like that.
Well, this has been fun.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, it's been fun. All right. So like you said, he does coaching. Is that your main thing?
Yeah, coaching is
Is
the
you
main thing
like in
right now.
terms of
We got,
income?
yeah, we paused the Biohackers Guide funnel for the time being. I'm probably going to relaunch it with some other updates and that sort of thing. And so it's basically coaching and decade and day in-person events, and people could learn more about that at biohackercoaching.com. A lot of it right now we're working with a bunch of men that are just looking to optimize themselves physically and mentally. And, we're doing a lot on the brain and neurocognitive performance testing side too, and looking at things that may increase risk of dementia. I'm actually excited to dive into what you guys have got going on now with like the updates around self-decode. And I mean, maybe even plug some clients into that, especially if they could share their results with me and it can give us some of those good data points, but always driving things forward and
Absolutely.
just figuring out what's gonna give myself and our clients the highest quality of life possible and enjoy our time here on this planet. Look good, feel good, all that fun shit.
Awesome. I appreciate that. I appreciate you also. I like that you also think about life in terms of the quality of life that you have instead of just like getting too zoned in. You're just like, yeah, I'll have a beer, my brother.
Yeah.
Whereas it's like some people get way too focused and like I can't ever touch alcohol or whatever, you know.
Yeah, it's
But
funny.
yeah, I like
It's funny
that.
seeing people talking about how they're gonna live to 180. I'm like, dude, you look old for your age. Like, am I the only one with eyes? Go have a beer. You're not gonna live to 180. Stop it. No one believes you.
Dude, you look your age, man. How is this gonna work exactly?
Yeah.
At the very least, they look their age.
Yeah. God, let's just all be honest here and stop selling snake oil.
Oh my gosh, that's
All right. Good
hilarious.
hanging out,
You're
brother.
gonna live to 180. Yeah. All right, cool. Take care.
All right.
67% of listeners aren't subscribed to the show, so please don't forget to show your support by hitting the subscribe button now. You'll not only be supporting the show, but also investing in yourself and your health journey, all while helping to keep us ad-free.